Gather round and welcome back, folks, to another edition of Todd Talks College Football. We have a great episode coming to you today. We're going to look at the Big 12 over-under win predictions against two of the biggest sports books on your phone, FD and DK. We won't call them by name. We'll just give them the initials. And we're going to look at the over-under for these teams for entertainment purposes only. You do with the information what you wish. But we're going to look at it alphabetical order, starting with Arizona in the Big 12. Arizona is a 5.5 over-under this season, coming off of a 4-8 year. Last year, we've got games against Kansas State, Hawaii, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, at Houston, at Colorado, Kansas, at Cincinnati, Baylor, Arizona State. Can we get this team to over 5.5 wins this year? I think with Noah Fatella coming back, Brennan in his second year here at Arizona State, I really do think that we can get this team to a 6-6, 7-5 record out there. And at Arizona, the Wildcats bear down. I think they're going to bear down and get 6 wins this year, maybe 7, but I'm going to go ahead on record with 6. And I think the Arizona Wildcats will get over the 5.5. Bet on both books this time on this move over to Tempe, Arizona, and the Arizona State Sun Devils and my favorite quarterback, Sam Leavitt. That's right, folks. They're coming off a playoff appearance, 11-3 record, coming back. They do lose Cam Scatterboo, but they do have a transfer from Army coming in to carry that rock for them. They have the receiver coming back that led the team last year. This should be a really good football team. Their defense is probably going to be a little better than it was last year. I really like Arizona State to get back to the Big 12 championship and maybe even another playoff run. The over-under has this team at 8.5. That's on both sports books. And we've got ourselves a couple of gimmies at the beginning. We got Northern Arizona. They are traveling to Mississippi State. But if you saw my last video before on the SEC, this is going to be a terrible football team. Texas State. They do then travel to at Baylor, which I think will be a defining game early in the season to see exactly where both of those teams are. We got TCU at Utah, Texas Tech, Houston, Iowa State, West Virginia, Colorado, and Arizona, and they're at Colorado. I think this team at 8.5 is the over-under, or 8.5, excuse me. I think this team is poised for at least a 9-3 season. I'm thinking 10-2. I'm thinking a Big 12 championship run here for the Arizona State Sun Devils. Again, getting to that chance to get back into the playoffs. So I'm going to take the over of 8.5 on the Sun Devils. All right, let's move up to Waco, Texas, and the Baylor Bears. And I tell you, this is one of the teams that no one's pegging this early in the season. They got them. I've seen people saying the under at 7.5, which is the under. The over at 8 or 7.5. I tend to believe this is going to be a better than 7.5 team. I think this is a chance for a playoff team if they can get their defense tidied up just a little bit, cleaned up. They got all 3 of their Big 12 games at home. They got Arizona, they got Utah, and they got Kansas State all coming into Waco this year. They do have Auburn also. They do go on the road at SMU. The season will be told in the first 4 to 5 weeks with this team. I think this team is going to step up, although they did have a big loss yesterday in Pendergrass, one of their second leading rushers. And last year, he did get injured and is out for the year, unfortunately for Baylor. But they have a freshman behind them that's supposed to be a workhorse coming up, so maybe they can get Washington and the freshman to be the dynamic duo that the Pendergrass and Washington was going to be. So I like the Baylor Bears over 7.5, at least 8 wins. I'm thinking they can get to 9-3 with this schedule. I'm very confident with Sawyer Robertson that he's going to be able to lead this team and produce points, which is what it's going to take in the Big 12, points. Like, everyone's worried about the defense. There's very little defense that we got to worry about in the Big 12. Points are the matter, and Baylor's going to be able to score points. And I think they can outscore most of the teams on their schedule and get them close to a Big 12 championship, or at least really, really on the verge of playoff championship if they can win that Big 12. So I like the Baylor Bears over 7.5 in 2025. Up next, we go to Provo, Utah, and the BYU Cougars, and they unfortunately lost their great quarterback from last year to a transfer for whatever reason occurred up there, but they are going to be starting a new quarterback in 2025. The over-under has this at 6.5. I think they have a real good chance of just getting over that at 7, maybe 8 wins here for the BYU Cougars. They do start off with Portland State and Stanford. They got at East Carolina, at Colorado, Virginia, Arizona, Utah, at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, TCU, Cincinnati on the road, and UCF. I think that schedule suits up well for BYU to get to 7 wins. 6.5 is the number. I think this team could be an 8-4 team. That would be a step back from their 11-2 record last year, but to be expected with this change in quarterback. Potentially the other guy could be great, but we knew what we had last year in Jake. Now he's not there. So I really do think this team is going to be above the 6.5 in 2025, the BYU Cougars. Up next, we roll up to Cincinnati, Ohio for the Cincinnati Bearcats, and they are coming in with a 6.5 over-under here, folks. And I think this is a really tight number for Cincinnati. I think this team could be improved, but only by maybe a game. They were 5-7 last year. I think they can get to 6-6. They do have some challenging games. They got Nebraska to start the season in Arrowhead. They got to play Iowa State at home, Baylor at home, TCU on the road, at Utah, Arizona at home. I really think that they could get half these wins in here and get to 6-6. I don't think they can get to 7-5 with this schedule coming into 2025. So I'm going to put the Bearcats as an under on the 6.5. Got the Boulder, Colorado, and the Colorado Buffaloes, folks. This is going to be another exciting season for Deion Sanders with the young freshman quarterback coming in and Julian Lewis. And we'll see if he can actually play and get some production against a team that's probably going to have a subpar offensive line again, and we'll see if they can get any production out of that. The over-under on this team is 5.5 wins, and they've got to start off the season with Georgia Tech. I don't think they can win that game, even though it's at home, but we'll see. Georgia Tech's going to be bringing back a pretty good team. Delaware at Houston, Wyoming, BYU, TCU on the road, Iowa State at Utah, Arizona at West Virginia, Arizona State, and Kansas State. Unfortunately for them, they pick up at least they got 4 of the top 5 teams in the Big 12 on their schedule this year. So this is going to be a real challenge at 5.5. I think the Buffaloes could get to 6 wins. I also think they could stumble around to 4 wins. At 5.5, I'm a Deion supporter, so I'm going to give them the 6 wins and take the over, but I don't know that I'd be running out and putting a bunch of bucks on that thing because the Buffaloes are probably just going to be an average football team this year. Let's move to Houston and the Houston Cougars. Last year, 4-8, coming off of Willie Fritz's first year out there in Houston, and he didn't produce great results there for the Cougars. Now, they got an over-under at 5.5, much like Colorado, and I really feel like this team is an under 5.5 win team as it looks on paper. Maybe they'll turn it around, but I don't think so with this schedule. They got to play SF Austin at Rice, Colorado, at Oregon State, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State on the road, Arizona at Arizona State, West Virginia at UCF, TCU, and at Baylor. I see at least 4 losses for sure. I'm going to go ahead and say they're going to split the other games. That's going to put them about 4-8. I think this is a best of 5 win team, and I'm going to go the under on the Houston Cougars at 5.5. All right, let's move to one of my favorite looking bets on the whole roster here for the Big 12. That's the Iowa State Cyclones. This line's coming in at 7.5, folks. They're coming off 11-3 season, 10 years under Matt Campbell up there in Ames, Iowa. And I really do think this team is going to surpass the 7.5 win total and could potentially be bidding for a Big 12 championship, if not the playoffs. Iowa State is coming in. They do play Kansas State in just a couple weeks in Dublin. They got South Dakota, Iowa at home, at Arkansas State, Arizona, at Cincinnati, at Colorado, BYU, Arizona State, at TCU, Kansas, and at Oklahoma State. I see more wins than losses on that. That gives me hope that this team is at least going to hit the 8 wins, but I'm really projecting them 9-3, 10-2 here, especially if they can pull that first win out against Kansas State in Dublin. That's going to put them on a cruise right up to 9 wins and maybe 10, well above the 7.5 the Cyclones need to get above this number. Up to Lawrence, Kansas, and Rock Chalk Jayhawk, the Jayhawks of 2025 have a 6.5 projected wins on both books. And I tell you, folks, I think it's going to be hard for the Jayhawks to get over 6.5 wins this year. They got to start with Fresno State, Wagner, at Missouri, West Virginia, Cincinnati. They go at UCF, at Texas Tech, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, at Arizona, at Iowa State, and at Utah. If you want to count those up, folks, that is a Texas Tech, a Kansas State, Iowa State, a Utah, and a Missouri. All probably 5 losses right there. You put them in with one other loss and the rest of that schedule, and this is a 6-6 football team. I'm not sold that Kansas Jayhawks are going to make a big push over their last year's 5-7 record. They will be exciting to watch. They'll be in games. I just don't think they're going to be able to pull them out, and I'm looking for an under 6.5 win total for the Rock Chalk Jayhawks. All right, let's go from Lawrence to Manhattan, Kansas, and the Kansas State Wildcats. They got a number coming in at 8.5 wins, folks, and I like Kansas State this year, but I'm not sure I would like them to over 8.5 here to start the season. We got to start on the road in Dublin against Iowa State. I think that's a tough game for them to start with. I'm going to mark them down for the loss there. North Dakota, Army, at Arizona, UCF, at Baylor is going to be a challenging game. TCU at home, at Kansas. They do play Texas Tech at home, which could be a real barn burner. At Oklahoma State, at Utah, which will be a challenge. In Colorado, the end of the season. I'm looking at this team as about a 9-3 team. Maybe could punch it to 10-2 and again be playing for a Big 12 championship slot. We'll see. 8.5 though. This Avery Johnson, he's a turnover machine last year. He's got to clean that up. I'm not so comfortable that he's fixed all of his mistakes. I think his mistakes may cost him a game and put him under 8.5 at 8-4. I'm wishy-washy on the Wildcats here. I think you should probably stay away from it or go just under at 8-4 for this football team. Let's move over to Stillwater, Oklahoma, and the Oklahoma State Cowboys. And hard to believe it's Mike Gundy's 21st year out here in Stillwater. He's still the man. He's still the man with the plan. He still even wears the mullet sometimes when he wants to. 5.5 on the FD, 4.5 on the DK. Both of those lines are tricky. I think this is a 5-7 team, so I'm going to put the under on both bets here I'm going to put the under on the FD at 5.5. I'm going to put the over on the DK at 4.5. And I think this team's going to get the 5 wins, which will be a 2-win improvement over last year, although nowhere near the standard that Oklahoma State thinks they are. The second OSU is what they would call themselves if it was me. But I'm going to go ahead and say 5 wins, 7 losses. They got UT Martin. They got to go to Oregon. That's going to be a challenge. Tulsa will be a win, not could be a win. Baylor could be a loss. At Arizona, Houston, Cincinnati, at Texas Tech, at Kansas State, UCF, and Iowa State. Again, folks, there's 4 major players on that roster between Baylor, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oregon, and Texas Tech. Those are going to be challenging games. That's 5 losses. They'll probably split the next 2, puts them at 4 to 5 wins here. I'm going to give them 5. And I'm going to go the over on the one and the under on the other. And we're going to double up our money here on the Oklahoma State Cowboys and Mike Gundy's 21st year, which might be getting a little stale out there in Cowboy. All right, let's move to Fort Worth, Texas, and the TCU Horned Frogs, and this is going to be Sonny Dykes' fourth season out there, and I love Sonny. He runs a great football team, and he's great for some comments, and he's always out willing to put his ass on the line for his team, and I really enjoy that about him. So the TCU Horned Frogs have an over-under 6.5 on both books, and I think this number is pegged right about right, and I think they could get to 7 here if they can win at North Carolina. That's right. They start the season off Monday night, Labor Day, at North Carolina, and Big Bill Belichick's debut up there for the Tar Heels. And if the TCU Horned Frogs can come out and get that win, I got this team over 7 wins, or 7 wins at least, over to 6.5. They got Abilene Christian. They got SMU. They got at Arizona State, Colorado, at Kansas State, Baylor, at West Virginia, Iowa State, at BYU, at Houston, and Cincinnati. They've got the toughest of the tough, baby. They got to go Arizona State, SMU, Kansas State, although SMU is not in their conference. They still playing them. Baylor, this is a tough schedule. This is like a top 10 schedule for TCU. So I'm going to give them 7 wins here over the 6.5 that they're projected just a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if they did drop one of these games, maybe late at Houston or Cincinnati to screw up their season. But I'm going to go with solid 7-5 for the TCU Horned Frogs. Right, let's move over to Lubbock, Texas, and the Texas Tech Red Raiders coming off of an 8-5 season. Joey McGuire's 4th year out here, and it sounds like they went out and bought a lot of players, spent some money trying to prep for this season to make a Big 12 run down there in Red Raider country, and we'll see if it's going to work. They are pegged at 8.5 wins, and man, that's a high line in this conference, considering we had Arizona State at 8.5. We also had Kansas State at 8.5, and then this will be the last 8.5 team at Texas Tech. I think we're pushing the envelope here, folks, just to get over the 8.5 wins, probably 9-3, could be 10-2. Could falter here, but let's take a look. They got Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and Kent State to start the season. They got Oregon State coming into their place, at Utah, at Houston, Kansas, at Arizona State, Oklahoma State, at Kansas State, BYU, UFC, and at West Virginia. Here's a little bit of the problem. It's at Kansas State, at Arizona State, at Utah. 3 of the 4 or 5 toughest teams in the Pac-12, they're going at. And I'm concerned about that. But let's see what they can do. I'm going to go ahead and give them the over 8.5 here. Going to get to 9-3, maybe pushing for a Big 12 championship game. This thing could come down to a 9-3 team on both sides of that championship game, depending on how these games play out, because a lot of these teams are playing each other. So I think Texas Tech is going to get to 9-3. Better than the 8-5. We got exciting times in Orlando, Florida. We got the return of Scott Frost back to the team that he took to what they will tell you was a national championship down there in Orlando for the UCF Knights. And they've got a over-under going into the season at 5.5 wins. They're coming off of a 4-8 season. They don't return a lot of players, 4 on offense, 6 on defense. That's pretty normal for a team that's got a new head coach coming in. So let's take a look. Jacksonville State, North Carolina A&T, North Carolina at home. That's a 1 win out of that. Maybe they could beat North Carolina. I don't think so. That's 2 wins early in the season. At Kansas State, Kansas, at Cincinnati, West Virginia, at Baylor, Houston, Texas Tech on the road, Oklahoma State, and at BYU. I'm putting this team under 5.5 wins going into the season. Maybe he can catch lightning in a bottle. I don't think so yet. Maybe in a year or 2, we'll see UCF's moving up. The Knights getting to where they want to be with Scott Frost back at the helm. But I'm thinking this is an under 5.5 for the UCF. Let's go to Salt Lake City and the Utah Utes. And we got Kyle Whittingham going into his 21st year. Man, he's as old as Oklahoma State guy, 21 years, both in the conference. Pretty crazy. 5-7 record last year. I really think the one thing we know about Utah is they don't generally have back-to-back losing seasons, and I think this is going to be an improvement out there in Salt Lake going into this season. So the over-under here, though, is 7.5, and that's right about where I got it pegged at. This team could be 9-3, could be 8-4. Either way, it's going to get over the 7.5. I truly believe with where Kyle Whittingham is going to take this team this year. I think he can get there and maybe contend for the Big 12 championship with Baylor, Arizona State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, Utah. Those got to be the five in your mouth trying to get to the playoff from this conference. They start out at UCLA, and I think they can win that game. Cal Poly at Wyoming. Texas Tech is their first hard one. They got them at home. I'm going to give them the win there against a bunch of transfers into Texas Tech. At West Virginia, Arizona State, I'm going to put them down for a loss. They travel to BYU, and I'm a little concerned. BYU at home against the Utes could be a loss, could be a win, 50-50 there. Colorado, Cincinnati, I'm chalking them up for wins. At Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas, I'm going to give them a split at Baylor and Kansas State. And, that gives me 3 losses, potentially 4. I like this team over 7.5. We're going to finish up here with the West Virginia Mountaineers, my favorite team in the Big 12. As you can see, my Gold Rush guy right there. I am a big fan of the West Virginia Mountaineers, and I like the fact that Rich Rod is back over there. I thought he should have never left and took that Michigan job. He was building something at West Virginia with the way he was recruiting, the way he was coaching, and he is back. So it's exciting times down there in Morgantown. They start off the season with Robert Morris. They have an over-under at 5.5 this year. I wore this shirt, the Bradley shirt, because Robert Morris has a lot of Bradley kids coming out of this high school here in Hilliard, and they got a few of them that play at Robert Morris. So since we're going to talk about it, I threw the shirt on. They got at Ohio, Pittsburgh, at Kansas, Utah, at BYU, at UCF, TCU, at Houston, Colorado, at Arizona State, and Texas Tech. They got a very challenging schedule here. Top 30 in the country for West Virginia. I like where Rich Rod's going to go back at West Virginia to get them back up to where they think they should be, which is at least a 9-3, 8-4 team every year, if not having a few years where they could make a run. So I really like West Virginia at 5.5. I'm going to give it to Rich Rod to get to 6 wins this year, make them bowl eligible, and see if they can build off of that success into next year. So I'm going to go the West Virginia Mountaineers just a hair, just a sliver over the 5.5. Over under that the books have them, and I'm going to go 6-6 in Rich Rod's first year down there in All right, that brings us to the conclusion of our under-over projections for each team in the Big 12, and I'm going to give you my 3-team parlay that I like the best coming out of this conference, and I'm going to start with Arizona State Sun Devils over 8.5. I really like that play. I think this is a great team. Sam Leavitt is a great quarterback, and I think they can really control their destiny in the Big 12 here and at least get to 9 wins, if not 10. Who knows from there? I like Baylor over 7.5 here, even though they lost their running back, Pennington, the other day. They still have Washington back there. They're going to be strong in the running game. They do got to fix their defense, but I think with the 3 major games at home in the Big 12, plus Auburn at home, plus SMU the second game, they maybe can catch Kevin Jennings before he really gets going with his new crew. I really like this team to get to over 7.5 wins, 8-4, 9-3, maybe competing for the Big 12 championship right along with Arizona State. My under in this group is the UCF Knights. I'm going to put them under the 5.5. I'm thinking they're going to be 5-7, maybe 4-8. Scott Frost is going to be building up. I think he's going to get back to where he was before, really competing for 9 win seasons down there. But I'm going to give them an under 5.5 going into this year. So that's where we are. this year with the Big 12. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And remember, gather round in ALTT. See you soon.